we're doing something different here on the BWI Live Show. First off, I really enjoy our conversations based on your thoughts in the BWI Mailbag. Normally what we do is we put that at the end of the show once we get through our news and our main topic of the day. But today, because I want to actually dedicate enough time and that we don't go for an hour and a half, we're doing the mailbag first, and then we'll see how we get to everything else. Also, I still don't believe you when you say you're interested in Penn State football after they've graduated and moved on to the NFL. We'll be talking the NFL Combine, but we're not doing that at the first thing because I noticed just the numbers don't tell me that you care as much as you say you care about the NFL Combine and Drew Allar. But we will be talking about the hype around Drew Allar throwing at the Combine and all those things that kind of go into all that stuff today. So that's what's coming up. Sean Fitz, welcome to the show. How are you doing today?
Oh, I'm wonderful, T. Frank. Thank you. We got some ice in State College today, which has led to a cancellation of school, which, hey, I'm all for safety, but my kids are here, so balance a little bit. No, we're good. I thought the Combine was fun. I thought, it's what it is at this point in terms of how much we take away from it, how much we choose to take away from it. It's really the story, right? Is how much you're thinking about guys ascending after the Combine, and are they different prospects than they were last week? Debatable, but at the end of the day, we're in over-analyzation season when it comes to the NFL, when it comes to, just trying to figure out which high money pieces are going to be well spent and which ones are going to be the annual opposite of that. But that's good. It's March. It doesn't mean much around here for basketball sense, but you're talking about spring football is a couple weeks away. Spring break next week. Reminder, we don't have shows next week. T. Frank, sorry if I stepped on your toes there. Nope. I'm looking forward to it. So I'm sorry for the inconvenience, but too bad.
We'll have some sort of content next week. So it just won't be the BWI Live Show. We'll have some stuff out for next week as well. I still have to figure out what that is because once we get off schedules, then I start to freak out because I am not a good planner. Bizzle changing his YouTube photo here. Good morning, Bizzle. We're going to get into today's topic right away, which is your questions. So if you got any thoughts, you got any questions, maybe some follow-ups on what we have pre-selected from the BWI Mailbag on the website over at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. Make sure you go and check that out right now and then drop your comments in the chat as we go. So today's first BWI Mailbag question is the topic for today's show. And this is from Iceman814, new member at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. First off, wanted to get this out here because I wanted to reward a new member for jumping right in and taking part and participating on the message board and here on the show. So Iceman, thank you. Your name is appropriate for today given that the school's off because we had an ice storm. He says, or they say, excuse me. Iceman. I think we've heard a lot about the veterans that Iowa State is bringing over that will likely contribute next year. But who are some of the young players that followed Matt Campbell that may make a dent in the rotation this year, depth, special teams, etc., but are kind of the guys for the future? Matt Campbell made it very clear that he did not want to build this team in a transfer portal way, meaning he was only bringing over seniors, and this was going to be a one-year build, and then they'd have to go and do it again. They wanted to build in some depth, some talent for future classes as well. So, Fitz, who are the guys that stand out to you that they brought in the portal? I'm going to expand this to not just the Iowa State guys that came over, but because they also targeted some guys on some players in the transfer portal on the defensive side that weren't all Iowa State players. So, with that said, long preamble, who are the players that you think are future starters or future stars for the Nittany Lions?
Future stars, maybe a bit stretching it because we're not really sure how these guys are going to assimilate to the talent that's already on hand. I look at a guy like Zay Robinson, wide receiver. It was a redshirt freshman, in-state kid for Iowa State, and kind of a slash do-it-all guy. He retained his red shirt, played in a couple of games, but retained his red shirt. I was talking to Jamison Patton, who, is his cousin, so maybe this was a bit biased on his behalf, but he said he cooked them sufficiently in the practice sessions that they had playing wide receiver. And I also talked to Justin Lustig a few weeks ago, and he mentions A. Robinson as potential punt returner. So I don't know that when we take a look at that receiver room, that there's going to be a bunch of young guys that sort of, make that giant leap. I think we're all expecting Kobe Howard to factor in there. But when you're talking about the top tier and the guys that are kind of fighting for it, nobody really jumps out. Cruz Brookins,
Keith Brookins.
Karan Brookins, yes, from
Keith
Timber
Jones.
Creek. Yeah. Well, I'm looking at the guys that came over. Karan Brookins, redshirt freshman. I think he's still got work to do in terms of the physical side of things. 6'5", 200, that's just gonna be natural. So, but Zay Robinson kind of fits in a little bit 6'1" and he's got some moves. So I'm excited to see how that turns out and how that plays, because you're looking at a spring where guys are going to get their opportunities and guys are going to get, it's going to be a roller coaster in terms of times that they lean on veterans, times that they go to the younger players, and I'm excited to see Zay Robinson for one.
So I'm going to go to a non-Iowa State guy first because I haven't had a chance. Whenever we've had this conversation, we've had this question before, but I never get to the guys I wanted to get to because I always start with like the top tier guys that are all kind of like the more known ones. But Amarian Davis coming over from Boston College, he really he caught my eye in film evaluation. He's not the biggest guy in the world, but just like all of their defenders, he is a willing tackler. He is a hitter. He needs to get bigger, but I like the mentality. I like the instincts he has as a defensive back, and I think he's got position versatility. He played free safety primarily, field safety for Boston College. I think he could maybe play nickel. I think he's got the movement skills. He did some good things in one-on-one. It's really going to depend on how they want to play him and where they want to play him. But I think he's going to be a special teams player. Everyone looked at even McNeil, who's the bigger guy. But the guy who has the football instincts to me, Amarian Davis, is going to be somebody in the future that is going to push very hard for playing time, and I think can be a special teams contributor this year. So that's the kind of outline I have for him, and there's some depth they've built and flexibility in that secondary. To the point, Fitz, we've talked about this. Like, I don't know exactly where everyone fits because I see a lot of guys that have overlapping skills, and I think that's probably intentional based on the way that they try to build these teams.
Yeah, I think so. You're taking a look at the overall build of what you had to come into the Penn State guys. You're looking at what you can bring in there and how you can supplement certain positions. And I thought safety was fine without going out and getting a guy like Amarian Davis, but they were able to, have some connections there. And in fact, Jameson Patton mentioned Davis as well as a workout guy who's done some really good things for Penn State's off the field so far. So yeah, I think that there's value in looking at where they went to supplement positions that were already kind of solidified. I think you look at linebacker. Chris Filippo is a guy that we've talked about before as well. Sort of a guy like that where you're adding somebody from the outside realm.
Yeah.
Where you were okay. I mean, obviously Tony and Alex Tash are going to miss the spring and not going to be around for a while with their injuries. But at the same time, if you felt pretty good about a position, it usually falls down in the pecking order. And safety and linebacker are two that we feel pretty solid about from a numbers perspective and from an eventual depth perception or perspective. And you go out and get guys like Filippo and Davis. I think that's a good sign. It's like adding, the 3 redshirt freshman offensive linemen. I mean, you don't know that you're bringing those guys into play right away. Maybe somebody makes a leap. Maybe Will Tompkins comes back from his injury. Kuel could be in there as well.
Yeah.
But you're looking at sort of bridging the gap between because 2027 is going to be fascinating to me. Like 2026 is appealing enough in terms of what they're trying to do, but there's a lot of 1-year rentals that they brought over as well. So you're going to have to bridge that gap, and how do those guys play in 2027 is going to be paramount to how this team functions.
Those 2 offensive linemen you mentioned are on my list because from an athletic perspective, they were doing they were building more talented depth at Iowa State in the last 2 years. And those 2 guys that they brought over are on par with the athleticism we've seen at Penn State. So, like, when we're talking about Ryan Clanton, and this is one of those things where I've been trying to – Phil Trautwein was a strength for Penn State on the offensive line. His recruiting and his development, Venga Ioane is going to be a first-round draft pick. He had proven to be able to put guys in the high first round. And replacing that on all levels felt like that was going to be very hard to do. And I don't know that Ryan Clanton is going to get first-round draft picks immediately, but you look at the talent they were able to secure at Iowa State and bring to Penn State, and they were able to retain the guys that were here at Penn State, I'm very optimistic about their ability to maintain a certain level of athleticism on the offensive line. They got to do it. Like, they got to keep doing it. They got to bring those talented players into Penn State specifically and not get like under the radar guys. They got to hit some hits, right? But I do think that there are those talented players. Penn State fans want to look at their guys and say they're all better than the Iowa State guys. These are two guys that are going to challenge Penn State players in terms of their athleticism and their production. And Will Tompkins has already been flashing in winter conditioning and challenging guys in individual drills, and won a couple, actually.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking forward to seeing that development, because it's just like there's sections and tiers of your development. I'm going to not push back, but I'm going to kind of play the flip side here and say, yeah, you want to hit on, and this is when I'm saying it out loud, kind of sounds kind of stupid, but those diamonds in the rough, those chances that you take, the better that your entire unit is going to be is when those guys hit. I mean, Donka at the time was a flyer. He was a guy that nobody was really in on. So you're looking at developing those guys into what they can be, going back to that conversation that we have probably every week now, what they can be versus what they're going to be. If you can hit on those guys, that just brings your floor up so much further. So you're looking at those prospects. You're looking at, Owen Alasini was a flyer. That's a big athletic guy that could really move, that didn't get out to many places. Penn State loved him. Not many places, felt the same way
him
about
a flyer? Him. That's fascinating. From a larger perspective, you mean? Because he just has an outsized position in my mind, given how talented he was and how much I thought that Penn State nailed it on the eval. But you're saying
do you remember we did shows here 2 or 3 years ago, and a parent, it had to be a parent of an opposing player was like, "Oh, this guy's terrible. Like, he sucks. Like, he's yeah." And that's part parent being online thing is not healthy. Don't recommend it at all. But like that was kind of his thing, was like he had to grow into an offensive lineman, and of course he was a prospect, not a player at that point. And you're looking at a guy that was close to 6'8", was really athletic, but never really put it together on the field. And sometimes that's, people can't separate that. What you see on the tape, as I've said, it lies. We're going to sit here and say that the film doesn't lie. It lies quite a bit when you're talking about high school competition, high school athleticism, how you show out against your peers. But you can easily go from an offensive lineman that gets run around at 6'8" to somebody that can be a really, really good player, because you eventually grow into the game. Now, Sterling Jenkins didn't grow into the game. Owen Alasini is growing into the game. So we're going to see how that long-term prospect project label comes through. But it also goes back to the fact that a lot of those offensive linemen, nearly all of them, are projects, even the really good ones. You looked last year at Manny Inacho, like he's still a project. And there's where you're going to look at the spending versus immediate return on investment versus how much is it worth going after a guy like this, because you've got a budget that you need to address for the current year, and then an expectation that this guy's not going to be ready until year 2 or year 3. Malachi Goodman's in that boat as well. It's like you're looking at how much are you going to, I don't want to say blow on a high school offensive line prospect, because it's not wise spending if you have a budget that you need to adhere to. Now he's going to Oregon, so it kind of blows that, it emphasizes that last part. But that's where I'm looking with this offensive line conversation, is like, if you can, think if you're playing FIFA or whatever they call it now, if you can sign a guy that's like a hidden gem for a minimum salary and eventually build himself up into a Premier League player or something like that, that's boom. Like, that is your ultimate Moneyball play right there. I guess it's kind of like any video game, but like you're trying to find those guys that sort of are in the margins, that can be high value guys at the end of their career rather than at the start.
Let's not get too deep on that, because you just opened up the file folder in my head of all the years I've played Madden where I simulated the season just so I could get to the draft.
Just do the offseason? Yeah.
And do like every 5th round starter that there was in the draft, and then draft those guys and trade starters so that I would get 1st round draft picks, and I'd create a 20-year dynasty where I won the Super Bowl every single year because I nailed it in the draft.
Without playing a single game. So here's the secret, Frank. You're not in a small minority there, and now those people like us, those people are our audience and our readers and everything, because the off-season transactional nature of it was so much more interesting than the repetition of just playing the games. And now look at this chat on the side here. That's those people too.
Unfortunately, some of those people also became GMs, which was always the goal for me. And then I think I shot for the moon and I landed among the stars because I get to do this show with Fitz. I think another pair of players, we talk about the D-line acquisitions for the future. So there's players that are going to contribute. You're going to see them this year. I'll name 3 here in the front 7. And now we're just kind of like naming everybody, but I do think that these players have a significant impact on the future of the program. Armstrong Nadim and Elijah Carnell are 2 defensive tackles that I don't think right now you would project them to start, given the veterancy and the experience within this system that Siali Tapaki and Keanu Williams have. However, if you're talking about like, how do you see the next wave of guys? Elijah Carnell is 6'5". I think they want to get him around the size of Keanu Williams if they can, 315, 320, somewhere in there. And then Armstrong Nadim played nose tackle as a redshirt freshman at 290 pounds. He's got kind of short arms, but the dude is built like a tank. And there is the opportunity for him to be more athletic. There's a very narrow thing he was asked to do last year on film. And so it obscured some of the other athletic traits he may have. And so I think those 2 are like the defensive line of the future. I think they intentionally built in waves of these guys, not just for this year, but for the future. And then a guy we haven't talked about enough is Caleb Brazina, who is going to play this year. I think he's going to be a pivotal backup. But if you're talking about who's the Mike of the future, to me, that a guy who's a junior, going to be a senior next year, that would be Brazina to me, as somebody who is going to be a feature player as a depth rotational piece. He's going to come in and spell both positions, but his skills, I think, lean towards he's going to be a guy they trusted to play Mike last year, and that'll happen in the future, as long as, all the things stay the same and there aren't major injuries or something that happens along those lines. So I know Penn State fans are nervous about the defense, but I do think that it is situated that it won't be a one-year thing. They have kind of built in the 2-year progression in the front, right up the middle, so that they don't have to go back into the portal and find some of these big-bodied guys or rely on young linebackers next year after 2026 to keep the defense stable. Because if there's something that I do believe, it's they want to have stability up the middle. We're talking about Matt Campbell, Fitz, who went from Toledo to Iowa State and had to completely change his defense because he didn't have enough defensive tackles to play the way he wanted, or defensive linemen, I should say.
Right.
And so same thing with Danton Lynn. Went from UCLA to USC and didn't have enough defensive tackles, didn't have enough run support. And so you have 2 people at the very top of the organization who very much value that, and they have seemingly emphasized that for the waves of the future here. Give you the final word here. Anything you want to rebut to that or anything you want to add to that, and then we'll get to another question.
Was Carnell there last week? I missed him if he was.
I don't remember. If he was, I think he might have been there when Rocco Becht was out, and I was not able to talk to anybody. But I don't think he was. I think he was not available.
Gotcha.
But,
yeah, I missed him if he was, because we talked to Ike Zogo, and he was talking about the difference between playing edge on the 3-3-5 versus playing edge in the 4-man front. He's looking forward to it. He's a little bit trimmer than I expected him to be, about 275. He's not a young guy, but he's a guy that's going to be, I think, a bigger part of the rotation than people will remember. It's funny. Somebody here in the chat says it's weird not knowing half the players on the team, normally just learning the freshman class. But yeah, we all are. That's where we're at right now. So we're trying to piece these things into place. I'm fascinated with how that defensive line as a whole is going to come together. Much different look and much different body types than we're used to seeing. And how's that going to work? Which way is the right way? We'll find out when we're arguing about this in October and November, I'm guessing.
Yeah. Bizzle says I'm taking a lazy river approach this season. I think that's a smart thing to do. Yeah, just take it as it comes, enjoy the ride, and don't try to be paddling upstream on a year where there's so much change going on.
I mean, it's the internet, so I'm sure people are taking that approach all over the place, and they're going to just wait and see how everything comes into play. Can't wait.
The thing is, at the end of the lazy river, there is a waterfall.
A waterfall.
An actual waterfall off a cliff is what it seems. Two things. First thing I want to remind people of, and this is actually something I'm going to be writing about, is guys that came from Iowa State, and I have spent some time this week learning the 3-3-5 defense to understand how they were used last year, to understand on a deeper level their skills and how that may have obscured or emphasized certain things about them, like Eziogu and Cooper Ebel, guys that were playing a specific role, and that I'm going to be writing about that, and I'm going to try. I didn't get an all-22 video up this week because we were at Cale Sanderson's press conference on Monday, trying to get that done this week, so I've been going into that film and breaking it down. It doesn't relate to what they're going to be doing, but it is important to understand what those players were doing and how they may have a new life in a more traditional defense.
Yeah,
that's coming up this week.
While you're on that, I mean, Eziogu was a guy that kind of talked about playing and having the opportunity to rush the passer. And in a three-man front, you do, but you don't, right? You're there to take up space, take up blockers, and occupy.
Do you know the number of times they dropped 8? They only had 3 pass rushers. Like, that's not set up for you to win if you're a pass rusher. Like,
correct.
That's tough.
Yeah, that's So I'm excited to see how he can do, because it's a different body type than we're used to. It's definitely different than Yvonne Kamaju and Max Granville and those guys that are the twitchier guys. But you need those guys. You need 5 techs. You need guys that can play kind of all over the place. And your versatility can be your superpower in some of those instances. And I'm excited to see how that defensive line comes together. Again, I'm skeptical as to whether the interior plan will work. I mean, we're going to see if those big bodies can move, because it's there's taking up space and then there's making plays, and we're going to see if they can have the ability to do that. And they're all over the place with body types, with Armstrong, with Carnell, with Ty Blanding, who they're bringing back at about 300 pounds. So you've got a lot of variables that are going to factor into how they're going to stop the run this year.
And which is why, like, when I have a vague sense of what they're going to do, but what they actually will do on the field next year, it is pretty up in the air. But as we track that, you can join us right now at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com for 50% off. We've got our flash sale going on. Join us for half off, because Fitz, we've got some fun news to announce here on the show. I'll let you take it as far as we've added a new member to the Rivals national recruiting team. So tell us a little bit more about the latest acquisition, the latest commitment to Rivals.
Yeah, so pumped to have Alan Trieu on board. Alan was a guy that I worked with at 24/7 for years. He was a scout before that, just one of the most respected guys in the recruiting industry, a guy that's been around the Midwest for a long time. And what's that? Oh, this last staff came from the Midwest. Oh, that's fantastic, because I think we're gonna lean on Alan a lot, especially this cycle, maybe next cycle as well. So I'm excited to have him there. Also, Brandon Huffman on the West Coast joining us at Rivals on 3, whatever you want to call it right now. And we're excited for Brandon Huffman. Brandon broke the story of Kaka Malloy. Excuse me, I'm still working here, coming to Penn State. That is fascinating to me, because you're looking at Penn State not trying to get back to the West Coast, but leaning on those West Coast connections. And not many people out there are connected on the West Coast like Brandon Huffman. So Huff and Trieu, we're happy to have them. I think we're going to see plenty of them, both of them. You wouldn't think the West Coast guy would be active at the Penn State site, but I think we're going to see plenty of them this cycle. So another reason to check out Blue White Illustrated and Rivals.
And not only that, but Alan is going to be joining the show this week, so make sure you subscribe here to the Blue White Illustrated YouTube channel and you enable notifications, because he's going to be joining us here on the show so you can get to know him a little bit better, more directly. He has had some very positive Penn State football content recently over on the site. Another reason you should just subscribe, and if you want to do that, it's half off right now. So you've got a narrow window where if you missed our portal deal, this is back for a quick 50% off flash sale. So make sure you check that out at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. Most importantly, though, at this point, Fitz, we need to talk about Antifragile, because it has been too long since we talked about beer. So tell me about Antifragile Brewing Company in downtown State College.
Antifragile Brewing Company on Friday. Nate and I actually went down for a couple. We got done done with our work responsibilities, and we're like, you know what? It's a wonderful Friday to go down to Antifragile, because every Friday is a wonderful Friday at Antifragile. Bridge the gap nicely, and between the rest of my day and the Mountain Nittany Middle School production of Newsies, which was fantastic. But it was a good layover there to prep me for the middle school musical. So we love Antifragile's beer, the best beer in State College. The kombucha, the mixed drinks, the cheesesteaks are fantastic, and they are open late at night for your cheesesteak fix. It's a wonderful spot that we like to go down on East Calder Way. And again, it's getting to be that time of season. It was shorts weather earlier this week, and again, we're off for ice right now. But I think it's supposed to be really nice in the next couple of days to get down there.
Something on Saturday,
yeah, to sit on their patio and have a beer to celebrate and embrace spring break.
Yeah, you should definitely go check it out when it's nice outside. Sitting outside and having a beer is one of the greatest things in life that we are given. So if you have the opportunity, and that's exactly what it is, like 60 degrees one weekend, ice storm, snow, and then 70 degrees. Welcome to March. Okay, so let's get to our next question, which I'm going to pull out of a hat here. Poncho 570 asks a question that I'm actually... the more I thought about it, the less I was confident in my answer, which I think makes it a great debate or conversational topic. How do you think the new staff will handle veteran reps with new installations on both offense and defense? I want you to start with offense, Fitz, because I do think that there is a little bit of a clearer plan here. But how do you, and I know you don't have to know the answer, but like from a structural standpoint of you've got so many new players coming from different places, how do you think they're going to handle who's the first guy through the drill? Because those things do matter, even if they don't say that's the starter. It's the guy we trust to do the drill correctly and be the leader of the position. So how are you viewing all of that heading into spring football in a couple of weeks?
I honestly had not thought about that last part of it. I was thinking more about, hey, there's a lot of guys that are banged up right now or coming off of off-season surgery and cleanup. And we saw, Andrew Appley's, on the shelf right now as well. So you've got opportunities for those guys, because that's the first thing that you like. If you're not available, doesn't matter if you're going to take veteran reps or, whatever we may call it. So I think you first sort through the injuries, which obviously Rocco Becht is the number one guy that jumps out at you right there. So you're going to essentially start spring with a backup quarterback, with Alex Mansky taking the snaps likely. So you're I don't want to say limited in what you can do there, because because Rocco's so in tune with what they've done on offense, and it's going to be a learning curve there for Alex Mansky and for the young quarterbacks that they brought on board as well. Tight end is the same way. You got Gabe Burkle coming off of injury. Andrew Appley's hurt. Cooper Alexander is going to be a guy that's going to get a lot of reps. And I don't want to say he was an afterthought to this class, because he's a guy that can play. As you said, he can play right away if they need him to. But usually you don't look to the fourth tight end or the fourth and fifth tight ends, him and Brian Kordovich, as guys that are going to get a bunch of reps. But that's going to be the case this year. So you're naturally limited in what you can do because of the injuries that you're going to have at certain spots. Of course, we're going to flip over and talk linebacker. I mean, to me, offense and defense are night and day here, because yes, you're bringing in a bunch of offensive guys from Iowa State that were in the system. They're familiar with Taylor Mauser. They're familiar with Jake Waters and how they're going to be coached and how they're going to be in the places that they need to be. Defensively, you brought a bunch of guys from Iowa State. They weren't running this defense. They're not prepared to sort of be dropped into the hot oil and just cook right away. It's going to be a situation where I think that they're going to have to come around and figure that out. So veteran reps, or whatever we're going to call them, I think they're going to be fewer and further between this spring, because you've got a lot of installation you need to take care of. It does not seem like they've done a lot in terms of installing, at least as of last week when we talked to them on defense. There's a lot of learning on the fly here, and I don't think you're going to get that by just kind of sitting out.
Okay. I'm doing that thing where I'm trying to start the conversation from three different points in my head, because what you just said there at the very end reminds me of last year when they said kind of the same thing of, we're going to get through spring football, see what we have, see how the installation is going. And that's going to build our personality for the year. And I keep hearing this from coaches, right? I keep hearing like spring football is more about this rather than that. And fall camp is when we really like install what the plan is going to be. And I didn't see that, I didn't see that last year. It felt like there was a lot of saying and not doing. And so this year, like the fact that they we talked to the players last week, and they basically said that they just started into kind of the scheme and the system that week, like the final week in February, where it was very much we're going to do more team building, very intentional of we're going to build the team first and then worry about that part second. And I do think that with as flexible and as versatile as D'Anton Lynn has been, where, I mean, hell, in 2023, he changed his defensive line 5 weeks into the season and started playing 3 pass rushers. He played his 3 technique, was a defensive end. And he did that for most of the second half of the season. So this is a guy who is willing to change things on the fly in the season. So I think that there's a basic structure and outline of what they want to be, and then the details of who's going to be the hybrid player. Are they going to run more odd or even front looks? Are they going to add in safeties into the box more often? Are they going to play too high? Are they going to play man coverage? It's all going to depend on what those players can learn and how they can apply those skills. And I do think that there is that aspect of this in spring football where I kind of think before, like, it was a lot of lip service to that idea. Where they, especially some of those other defenses that were so complex, they wanted to get installed as soon as possible and get as many reps as possible. But then you're trying to train players on something very complex, and you need them to get as many reps as possible for the starters. Kind of going back to Sean Clifford after the pandemic, got every single rep of Mike Yurcich's offense to get him ready to play that year. And then when he got hurt, the other players hadn't had any opportunity to get really landing reps because they were plowing everybody's reps into the main guy to get him ready, because that was the best way for them to actually win football games that year. And so there's that aspect on defense, but on a broad scale of, first off, is the defense hard to learn, and do you need to have starters that get most of the reps to understand it? Because that will then probably by the midpoint of spring football clarify, at least to the people in the room, who's ahead, right? In some of these situations, who, if there is a position battle, is being favored by the coaching staff. And so to me, those are kind of the interesting dynamics on the defensive side of the ball, is that I think you will start to see a bit of a pecking order that can establish who they want on the field, but then how they use everybody, I think, is a little bit more fluid.
And I think that makes sense. Yeah, I think that the big question there is you get 15 practices, including blue-white game or blue-white week, whatever. It's going to be the last practice. So you get a finite amount of time that you get to spend on the field actually putting this stuff in. So, like, is the threshold to learn 3 practices, 5 practices, half the spring? Like, is the threshold before you start, hitting that treadmill running as fast as you can? How far do you get before that you get to that spot, and how does it look up into that point? And I it's not a situation where if you go further into spring, you're wasting that time because you want these guys to know the defense like the back of their hand, obviously, but you're passing a lot of time not going full speed. And that's, the staff seems like they want to go full speed as much as possible, but it's about taking care of things on the front end. So I'm curious to see how much of the spring is dedicated to that install versus how much of the spring is dedicated to, hey, we're going to play some football now. And that's important too.
I think you said it better than I did, because I felt like I was talking at both sides of my mouth there about like how it's going to be installed, because I think that is the rub right there, exactly how you're going to maximize all the practices. So Bizzle asks us in the chat, is AI happening in recruiting tape? I saw something on Twitter the other day where somebody was called out for using AI to make some fake highlights. Do you have any thoughts on this one? Is this obvious? Is it rampant? Is it something to be concerned about? How have people been talking about this as it's come up?
Yeah, it's just something you have to look. I mean, basically, when you take a look at film, whether you're coach, scout, whatever, you're looking for fraudulence, if you will. This is not just the AI thing, but if you're looking for a prospect, if you're scouting just a regular guy, regular tape, no AI or anything, you're looking to see what's different about this guy and what is, sort of what makes him an outlier, what makes him a top level prospect. And now with AI, it's going to be tough. And you're like, football coaches do not want to spend time counting to see if the ref on the other side of the he says he didn't mean to. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, like, Bizzle, he follows up and says, "I meant to use AI to watch film. That there's no substitute for your insight into a football player. AI can't watch film for you. Like, it can collect data, it can summarize things, but when it comes to actually making the evaluation, the human has to do it. There's absolutely no replacement. And if you do, good luck to you. Like, I hope that you enjoy your job." Somewhere else in 2 years.
Yeah, and this may have just been a complete coincidence because it did come up online this week that there are AI highlight tapes where you're seeing a guy catching a fade that's honestly looks like it came off of a lob wedge, just like straight up in the air and then just drops straight down into the player's arms. It's just very funny to see and terrifying in a sense, but that's a whole other conversation. But yeah, you're looking for outliers, you're looking for different things, and like football coaches are not going to want to count how many arms the ref on the other side of the ball has, like stuff like that. So this is not me saying football coaches are dumb. They don't want to waste their time with that shit. So like there's no real getting around. If you can do it really well, like people might miss that. And now, again, film
to me, that's the thing is like it can, if it can fool somebody for a moment and you get interaction, you have to back it up eventually. Like you actually have to go out and go to a camp or perform or something like that. And then there is that thing about we are now to a point where AI can fool you unless you are looking for AI. Right. If you're just kind of casually scrolling, you can miss some of those things. But when you look at it, it's like, okay, things don't work that way. Like Fitz
it's why it's just a part of the evaluation. Nobody's going to take a huddle tape and take a guy, at least in a major program. Nobody's going to take a huddle tape and just be like, okay, I'm just completely blown away by this. We're going to offer him and accept his commitment without meeting him, without, seeing him in person, seeing if the size checks out, talking to his coach and all that kind of stuff. So it's just I don't think places are in jeopardy of, going in that direction. If they are, as you said, they're going to be finding new jobs. But at the same time, it's like, it's one more thing on the plate that you really didn't need, right? You didn't need to have to worry about, is this guy real or is this fake? Because it used to be, you take a look at the officials and how fast they ran, because there's some kerning there where you can speed it up, not just to 1.5 speed, but like you do 1.1 speed, you don't notice it as much, but it looks like, hey, you're running a 4.5, 4.4, something like that. So that's what you used to look at with that, and now it's just completely another world.
This is a good conversation. I appreciate Bizzle bringing some additional context. He says we collect data via film in our studies and have to manually code them. He says this is in a grad. I think he said this is in a grad student study program. So that is a second order sort of thing. So that is not necessarily about the coaches themselves. There are data collection services that do that kind of thing. That is a third party stuff. Now, if we're talking about individual coaches and their in-house data from practice, that's different. But that is more of like offloading work for GAs as opposed to the coaches themselves. I don't think that's directly impacting the coaches specifically, but also, as he said, you still have to check that stuff because it can hallucinate, it can be wrong, it can not get the context, the quality of the video, all that stuff matters. As somebody who has done manual data entry and collection for video in the past, it was a great opportunity for a human to learn football and to pick up on those things. So
just even snap counts and stuff is just like, you can draw stuff from that. And
and I'm concerned about the people that don't get to learn and don't get to put in the pipeline of football intelligence, because you have to do that grunt work sometimes. Like having gone through it, being the old man on the other side, sometimes you do need to go through that to develop the instincts and the 1,000 reps in your own brain to actually understand what you're seeing and more quickly diagnose what's happening on a football field if you do want to be somebody who watches film. So I think there are concerns about that with AI all over the place. I don't want to go down that rabbit hole, but that is something that I think is dangerous about offloading grunt work to a machine when there is a certain amount of blunt force repetition you need to be good at something. And if nobody's developing those tools, then nobody else is going to have a chance to get into the workforce. This is from Z-Man. He wants to know, this is just a clarification, is Ryan going to we're talking about Allen joining the team, so is Ryan going to interface with those guys, or is it completely different geographic coverage, meaning Ryan Snyder, our recruiting reporter here at Blue White Illustrated? Can you just clarify for people like how all this stuff works for the team?
Yeah, so we're looking at regional coverage for Allen is Midwest. So, he's based in Michigan. So he goes out and does Chicago area. And he said, he joked about he now has to include the Dakotas in there. So he's going to be covering the general Midwest for us. So it'll be, like having a Steve or a Chad Simmons. We're just adding to our national team, which is very important in my eyes in terms of those guys are among the most trusted for a reason. They do a great job in terms of getting some guys that, frankly, we don't get sometimes. Sometimes these prospects blow up on the spectrum and leave the team-focused guys, even guys that they know from day one, behind. So, and they usually, comes down to Steve or Chad, or now we got Huff on the West Coast. So those guys will be covering everyone, but just covering a region. And we're going to take the snippets that they get from the Midwest, from the West Coast, and using them on our site. Ryan's still going to be day-to-day in terms of Penn State recruiting, like actual content. And selfishly, we're still the guys to go to for Penn State content, but we love having those guys help us out because it makes such a big difference. I mean, I've spent when I started 24/7, we didn't have a guy in the Northeast for years, and eventually we got Brian Doan, who I respect as much as anybody in the business, and that really, really helped our coverage to sort of bring in those rocks that we aren't able to turn over all the time. You're not thinking about Connecticut, Rhode Island, those things. Then, and then all of a sudden, your coverage is better for it. So I think our coverage is better for it. And again, having worked with those guys, we got Greg Biggins out west as well. Sam Spiegelman in Texas. We've got a top-notch staff of national recruiting guys that definitely think is worth following.
Last one here on the show. This would be a great Nate question, but I just wanted to get this out here. We may ask this one when he comes back later, but your thoughts on Mississippi ruling NIL payments being exempt from state income tax? What sort of advantage does that give to Mississippi-based schools? And this just seems apocalyptic. I'm sorry. I got to insert my own opinion here, but Fitz, what do you think of this?
No, I'd love hearing your opinion on this. It's a way for states to basically show how much they care about their college sports and how much that means to them. And let's be honest, it's not a zero-sum game here. It's not just saying, okay, well, this guy is completely exempt for it. It's hey, we're going to make a lot of money as a state, like these programs have made a lot of money off of these guys, and maybe it's just like, okay, well, that's the trade-off here. That's let's make it easier for the good players to come here because they don't have to pay taxes. I mean, it's no different than some businesses. Delaware is the LLC state because of the tax situation. I mean, I don't see it being much different. I mean, I think it's a slippery slope, obviously, but at the same time, there's benefits here for the state at play, and I think it's gonna grab the headlines as, hey, these young guys are making money all of a sudden, and now they're getting benefits on top of the making money, and I mean, I think that's part of it, but at the same time, it's not just a singular come play for us. You don't have to pay tax. I think there's a lot of different things at play here, and it's again a slippery slope, but you see the states where they've done it. Mississippi's not the first state where they've done that. And that's a dedication to improving all of that stuff.
Yeah. I mean, it means you can offer a lower number and get a total higher output. I mean, it is just for the mathematics, it's an advantage for those schools. Beach Wine Guy says, come to Florida. There's no state income tax. So I'm going to drop it there because it's just leads down a road we don't go down on this football show. And so we're going to now move on. I apologize. But we've also spent 43 minutes on the mailbag. So it's also, we need to get it to the second topic on today's show, which is the NFL Combine, which came up yesterday. I recapped it yesterday, but of course it was all last week, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Players were on the field performing and putting out their testing numbers. We talked about it. And Fitz, you gave your high-level view of should the NFL Combine seriously affect anyone's draft stock one way or another, given it is a very specific thing that you're doing. But there is this reaction to the Combine, so I'll ask you just simply, who are the guys that had the best week in Indianapolis, in your opinion?
Yeah, I think Deny really helped himself. I mean, we talked on the show the other day about him being a freak, but not being a freak. Well, he put up some freak numbers, and he's not going to be a 4.3 freak, never was going to be. But when you can move at that size, and I mean, his 3-cone, number one, doesn't really align with what we've seen. But that was incredible.
Yeah.
Like in terms of what he was for a lateral movement guy, for a guy that can bend and turn the corner. He's down there running it with safeties and corners and things like that. So I kudos to whoever trained him on that, because it was an outlier about the 40 is the flashy number, no doubt about it. The vertical, you can see that right in front of you. The broad, you can see right in front of you. But something like that, where he's running with skill players, is unbelievable. And
yeah,
I mean, I don't know how to explain it, to be honest with you.
I couldn't. I was just like, I'm happy for Deny, right? So bottom line is, I think he's a hardworking individual who has put in the time and wants to be great. And I'm very happy for him. But from the football analysis standpoint, I'm like, where the hell was that? Because I was not predicting that. You were not predicting that. Most people were not predicting that. The point of the combine is exactly this. And there was a safety that did this. And I think Jacob Rodriguez is another guy who did this in terms of, there's questions about your athleticism on film. You put up crazy numbers at the combine nobody's expecting. That gets you the attention, because now we've learned something new or different based on our expectations of who you are. Deny going through the drills, the hoop drill, he still looked like the same guy. Maybe it was improved, where he had a little more bend, he had a little bit more flexibility to get down, pick up the towel, put it back down, and go through. But you could it did not completely erase the concerns of this guy sometimes struggles to change directions and bend and be fluid as an athlete. But it did put on display, he's a freak at a freak position. And so if you were thinking that you were going to get him in the 3rd round, you probably aren't now. So there is, I think, a certain amount of pressure at certain positions where you do kind of set a floor on where you may be. And I think he's a 2nd-round pick. He's going to be a 2nd-round pick this year, because there are too many GMs that look at those measurables and think, I can't find that anywhere else, so I want that. And the production is one thing, but he has not been unproductive. He's been a good run defender. He's been a great run defender at times throughout his career, and he's been an explosive pass rusher against inferior opponents. And he'll find some inferior opponents at the next level. It's just, the question was always, is he your franchise pass rusher to go in the 1st round, to take all those top 5 tools that we just saw, because that was a top 5, top 15 defensive end athletic performance, and actually be the number 1 guy in your pass rush? The film still says that that's probably not going to happen, but for his sake, if he's 33 on the draft board or 34, I think that's exactly where he should be. I think that's exactly what his talents are, and I think that his combine performance solidified that. And I'm happy for him as somebody who's put in the work to do all those things.
Yeah. And I think he's going to have the opportunity to do so. I think it's always going to help that he was, he was a 5-star back in the day, and that's not going to be the entire evaluation, obviously. But that is going to help him, because it's going to, those guys are going to look at his body of work as a whole and say, okay, maybe for a 5-star, he underperformed for colleges. But at the same time, there's something there. There was something there to make him a 5-star prospect in the first place. So I'm trying to think. There was the defensive end that was the number 1 player out of his class from he went to Florida, Ronald Powell, years ago, and he did really nothing in college and eventually got drafted basically because they knew that there was clay there. Robert Kendichi, those guys that were really, really highly rated.
Trayvon Walker.
Yeah, but that never really developed into eventual, great college players. But there's still something there. And that's what it is with with pro coaches. It's like, okay, there's something there. How do I mine it? Because I'm the best at what I do. And nobody can get talent out of these guys like me. And we're going to talk about Trieu, Allar here in a second, but you're looking at that at all positions. And I think that's going to help with Deny. It's going to help with, kind of with everything that he does. And I'm fascinated to see where he lands in the big board, because there aren't too many guys that are going to move like that. Now, I will say this. We've talked a lot about Zane Durant and the scheme and how that hurt him. I'm not sure that was the case with Deny this year. I think that the scheme was set up pretty well for Deny.
They were
And he just
designing
did not
plays for him to
capitalize.
get pressure. Yeah, like
Correct.
that's
You
the
think
that's
about
the
that
way you
UCLA
look at it.
game, and you think about the UCLA game, and kind of tear your eyes out. Just thinking about
Yep.
how many not should have sacks, not how many should have sacks there were there. So how
Yeah.
many times he got upfield and ran past. And I think that if you're going to go back and you're a pro scout looking at it, that's going to hurt him, because you can look at Zane Durant and say, okay, well, as a junior he was a beast, and as a senior he took a step back and he's playing a one gap, and that's not really his style. Then I had opportunities to make those plays this year and didn't
Especially as a pass rusher in the Big Ten portion of the schedule, where you're talking about a guy, when you are designing line games, like stunts, twists, things like that, you're setting it up so that somebody gets an advantageous pass rush to the quarterback. Nittany was the guy that they were setting things up for, and if you don't, that's why they run the hoop. If you can loop around an offensive lineman, exchange gaps tight to the hip, and get directly upfield, and the same thing, rushing on the outside, one-on-one with the tackle, bending the angle to the quarterback to its maximum direct route is the point of that drill, and that's what he struggled with. And then he runs a 6'9", and everyone's like, okay, well, technically he can do it in a drill. So, yeah, for sure. I think Zane, in I just quickly, because I do want to talk about Drew, and we got about 10 minutes left. Zane, again, I think set a floor to where he's going to go because of his athleticism, but the ceiling was always he's a 6'1", 290-pound defensive tackle who has not produced against the quarterback. His pass rush, Kevin Givens had roughly the exact same measurements, less athletic, and got more pressure on the quarterback. And Zane's been in multiple systems. This is not a one-year problem. It's been consistently his ability to disengage from blocks and get into the backfield as a pass rusher. If you're going to be a guy that runs a 4.75 40-yard dash and has a insane 10-yard split, but you don't produce pressure on film, then you're not in the category of a guy like Milton Williams, who was undersized, went early in the draft. So to me, I think he's going to play in the NFL. He's going to be an incredibly valuable disruptor in a team that wants an attacking defensive tackle. But we're talking about those guys as very niche players and guys that maybe aren't starters in the future. And it always sounds like I'm crapping on these guys, but I'm just trying to set the expectations of what they are going to be at the next level and get, my hope for their best path to being as successful as possible while being realistic about, kind of what they are. Drew Allar. Beach Wine Guy says his performance rated all over the place. CBS says it was erratic. ESPN said he could rise to the second round. Still a lot for him to prove. To me, two things stood out. The fact that when they said he was 4 months into a 5-month rehab and he couldn't do any testing, it was a rehab thing, he couldn't do any testing, but he was out there throwing before the rehab is fully complete, where he said I could play if I needed to, but he's not back. And to do that, to go to the combine and to compete and to put whatever draft stock he had on the line where you could have a bad day, I think that was the signal he sent, that he had a good day, and that I'm sure the interviews were good, because we didn't get a bunch of leaks about he was fine on the field, but a bunch of red flags in the media, in the meetings with teams. He aced the combine in the areas he needed to ace, but it only highlighted him as a player we hadn't been talking about because he didn't play at the end of the season. So the media opinion of he's a draft riser is about awareness. To me, it's exactly the same place where he was probably a second-round draft pick, maybe a third, before the combine, but nobody was talking about that because he was injured and he was out of sight, out of mind. Now he's not out of sight, out of mind, and suddenly in a weak draft class, the 5-star quarterback is going to be a part of the conversation. But he didn't do anything to ruin that, and he had a positive day, just from my view of his throws. Did you have any thoughts about how he performed or the narrative coming out of the combine?
Not really. I mean, it's just I have a tough time separating what I've seen with what we saw the other day. I think it's awesome for him. I'm certainly rooting for him. But you put that game tape on, and there's still sort of warts that are going to have to be overcome. Now, in the NFL, you're not asking him to come in and start. You're not asking him to come in and play. That is the big difference here. Is you're asking him to eventually develop, and somebody's going to look at him and see Matt Stafford. right, wrong, indifferent, whatever it's going to be. Somebody's going to look at him and say, okay, well, this is the next version of that guy. And we've seen a lot of Matt Staffords. There's one Matt Stafford, but it's just one of those things where you're going to get a finite amount of quarterbacks that you're going to have the opportunity to draft and develop. And if it doesn't hit, there's the release button. This is not the investment that you're going to have to make for a first round quarterback or a top of the first round guy. So I think that plays into it, and that's helpful for how all this works. I mean, does it matter that if you drafted at the end of the first round, you get that 5th-year option? Does that matter? Does somebody trade back into the back of the first round for Trieu for that particular reason? I think that's a bit of a stretch and over analysis, but at the same time, it's worth talking about for a guy that's going to need a ton of development behind the right guy. So I think that's really what I'm looking into. I don't think that his stock, I agree with you 100%. I don't think his stock actually changed all that much in Indy, but we're talking about him now. So like the general awareness is a big thing for him.
I'm trying to find a conversation we had on the message board thread because I tried to kind of nutshell the strengths and weaknesses that Drew Allar presented in on film. Because here's the thing, Penn State fans. He's not a bad quarterback. You're wrong. You're wrong. He's not a bad quarterback. Now, is he a franchise quarterback worthy of going in the top 10? He did not prove that at Penn State. He did not accomplish what I thought he could accomplish at Penn State on the high end. He did not accomplish what he wanted to accomplish on the high end. That's why he came back for a senior season, and then things fell apart. That part is obvious and true, and you are correct about that. But when you watch the film of Drew Allar, what you see is a guy who is unbelievably good at processing information pre-snap and post-snap. Plays that I've tried to articulate specifically why he did something very well pre-snap to get the team through a 4th and 2 or a 3rd down conversion, and he's grinding it out against Villanova because of the offensive situation that goes completely unrespected, unnoticed by fans because it's not something that happens 35 yards down the field with a beautiful arc at the end of a catch by a receiver. And that is important, and that is missing, and that's absolutely true. But when you look at the breadth of his film going past this year, going back to what he did with Mike Yurcich and what he did in the first year with Andy Kolnicki and Tyler Warren, he is incredibly good at processing information post-snap as well. He understands the picture better than any quarterback Penn State has had here, probably since Trace McSorley. And I know that means just Sean Clifford, but like, you know what I mean? Of like, he is
better than take one
he
of
has,
Sorry.
Exactly. His ability to see the picture change, know where to go with the football, and have the answers to the test. If you are an NFL head coach, you want somebody who's going to be responsible with the football and knows the answers to the test so you don't have to hold his hand through those things. Now, where does he need to improve? The areas he needs to improve are all very obvious. I know that we like his deep ball. I think the deep ball accuracy can be a challenge in terms of the feel and the pace of the ball with receivers from play to play. That's not a strength of his, but I don't think a lot of those passes that are touchdowns on his highlight reel, a lot of those deep balls are wide the hell open. Like they are just like, don't miss. Now, if it's a vertical lead up the field, those are harder passes. Like Josh Allen was bad at those passes for a long time, of having to put the ball on the money, up the sideline when you don't have that 45-degree angle on a post or something like that, that's running away from the defensive back, and you have a clear picture of like the lead you need to put on the ball. But the main things are, as much as he is a cerebral savant at football, and I mean savant, it is unlike any quarterback I've scouted or watched in depth in college. The pressure of the position clearly affects him in certain moments, and he is a ultra responsible player. You need a little bit of risk analysis in there of, okay, yes, I have the first down here, but if I pump fake, that's a touchdown. Like there are plays on there where if you give him two options, he will take the one that is the responsible, reliable answer. He needs a certain amount of athletic hubris of like, I'm Drew Allar and I'm going to throw you a touchdown here and I'm going to win this game in the second quarter. There's not a lot of bloodlust from what you can see in the decision-making process. And those two things compound to the big moments in the games, right? and what everyone's screaming in the chat. I haven't even looked at the chat. I know the replies to this video are going to be all the interceptions at the end of the game. His decision-making on when to be aggressive, to me, is the single biggest thing he has to improve on. Because there are moments when it's like, I need to win the game for everybody here because this is a shit show. And then he makes a bad decision because he doesn't have a feel for when to take the risk. And to me, is that the teachable thing you can give to him? Because if that's the case, then he is going to be the steal of this draft. He's going to be a Russell Wilson sort of win, a Drew Brees sort of win when it comes to his ability to elevate a team to be a franchise quarterback that you got in the second or the third round. But that's the gamble, and that is the intangible part that you can't necessarily say you can fix his footwork. That's not a big deal. It's that part that everyone's nervous about. And I sit there with you. But that doesn't mean he's a bad quarterback. Because Penn State fans feel their feelings. And like your feelings, you're allowed to have them. But the facts, you're ignoring a lot of good information about Drew Allar. And I just had to say it because it's been a while since we've had this conversation about Drew Allar. And everyone has had their opinion out in the public recently. And there's a lot of people that don't actually watch his film and haven't seen all of his film for the last 5 years going back to high school, who actually have tried to understand what's going on. And so, like, I think it's just like having a realistic view of who he is important.
I mean, I have open right now the NFL.com ranking all 63 NFL starting quarterbacks from the 2025 season. Drew can play in the NFL. Yeah. I'm looking at some of these names. Drew can play in the NFL. I mean, the guy that started the AFC Championship for Denver there's a lot of Drew there in Jarrett Stidham in terms of being a highly regarded prospect who maybe underdelivered at times. And then eventually he's in his 7th year in the NFL. Like he does not have to be a starter. He does not have to be that guy. And the further you look down this list, there are a bunch of, really good high school prospects that didn't develop into what we thought they would be in college or the pros, but they're still hanging around because they've got talent and they've got work ethic and they've got the ability to understand what's happening on film, what's happening around them in the locker room play sheets and all that kind of stuff. So I think it's fascinating to look at this and say, okay, well, is the end game here Drew Allar as a starter? Like, not necessarily. And that's fine. The end game for him is, number one, he's going to get paid a decent amount of money to play football, and hopefully he can stick around the NFL for a long time. So I think that, we're
he's
looking
not
at
Christian Hackenberg. Like, I understand the references, the helmet scouting, the fear of all those things. He is fundamentally, to his DNA, different than Christian Hackenberg as a quarterback. I don't care that they're the same size, came from the same school, had the same journey. They are wildly different people. And that is the part that's going to change the outcome for Drew Allar.
Yeah. Max Brosmer, Brady Cook, Tanner McKee, Kenny Pickett, Gardner Minshew, Trey Lance, Chris Oladokun, Clayton Tune, Cooper Rush, Jarrett Stidham, Jake Browning, Andy Dalton. I'm done. Just in terms of guys that started games in 2025. There's everybody needs quarterbacks. And he's of all the quarterbacks, Drew is a quarterback. Yeah.
Absolutely. The last thing is the combine and the wild numbers we saw across the board. I saw a tweet that I thought put it perfectly. People, we've learned the combine. We've learned the narrative. We've learned all these things about what's good, what's bad, what you want to do, what you don't want to do, what tests you want to do, what the threshold is for doing them. Zakee Wheatley and Katron Allen went out and were excellent in field drills. Neither of them did testing. And so, like, we didn't learn or disprove anything about those guys. I think they're excellent football players. I think they're also going to play at the NFL level for a period of time. But if we're talking about, like, what the combine is for and the fact that we have all these gaudy numbers, it's because people that aren't good at testing don't test at the combine. They just opt out of it. And so that's why you get, like, only positive results at the combine anymore. And then every once in a while you got a guy who's willing to put it out there and compete, right? He's going to go out there. He's going to do all the drills because, like, that's how he's wired. And, I don't think that's the smartest thing in the world because you're always looking for a reason to eliminate football players because there are too many. And so if you give people a reason to eliminate it's a negative thing. So I don't think it's a bad thing. I don't think they're hiding. I think it's just the tactical thing to do for those players. And so, like, Venga Ioane doesn't need to, but some of those other guys were smart not to.
Did you see Jennings Dunker from Iowa, by the way? Speaking of these guys,
I did not. Sunday I was preoccupied with some other things, and Venga,
it's just worth a Google search. I mean, he was actually really good at the combine. I've always been really high on him, but he's got the ginger mullet, the mustache. It's a work of art. Yeah,
I saw the 40 time. That was excellent. Honestly, as somebody asked me, like, would Dennis Sutton fit the Bills? I would take 2 or 3 of those Iowa offensive linemen and play them all at guard. I would play every one of those offensive linemen at guard. That was a really good offensive line at Iowa.
During the pandemic, when I was at 24/7, we did a draft where we just basically did a fantasy draft for prospects, and we were getting down toward the end, and I'm trying to figure out, like, okay, well, these guys are all the top guys are off the board. Where do I go with this? And Dunker was one of my picks because, well, he's going to be an offensive lineman at Iowa. He's probably going to be fine.
Yeah.
Like there are certain programs where that comes into play. I mean, we had the question last week about is Matt Campbell trying to make Penn State into Iowa? Well, if you can do that on the offensive line, or at least in the past offensive line, a tight end, there's elements of Iowa punter that really work out well in the college game. So, yeah, I mean, I think it's been fun to speculate on that, but if you get a chance, just Google him. It's majestic. It's incredible.
We will be back tomorrow. Once again, Allar Trieu going to be joining the show and channel this week on the BWI Live Show. Great time to subscribe both to BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. You're going to get the flash sale coming up here as the end graphic for people just listening. It's 50% off for a short period of time. I don't have the exact numbers, but subscribe right now. And also like the video. Help us out here as we deliver you an hour and 6 minutes of content on March 3rd in between lifting and spring football. We're doing all the Lord's work, providing you insight into Penn State football, some of these deeper topics. I really enjoyed this. So Fitz, thank you for sitting through the thought exercise today with some of these topics. We'll be back tomorrow with Greg Pickle. Till then, we'll talk to you later.